Hello, you writing rebels. I'm Kristen McTiernan, here to continue on with our nonfiction month of October. This week's interview is going to be with acclaimed ghostwriter Joshua Lisec. Now, you might be wondering, Kristen, why are we hearing from a ghostwriter? I am an aspiring author or a current author. I don't have any interest in hiring a ghostwriter myself. That is a fair and correct question. The thing about listening to professional writers, as in writers who make their living writing for other people versus independent authors like yourself, is that there are a lot of different angles to look at what it means to market your work, to market yourself as a personal brand, to get you and your ideas out there, and basically what it means to use your book as a business card, something you can be proud of, something people instantly think of when they hear your name. Nonfiction and fiction are marketed very differently, and the driving forces that causes you, an author, to write nonfiction are very different than what causes you, an author, to write fiction. Just as what causes a consumer to pick up a nonfiction book could often be wildly different than what causes a consumer to pick up a fiction book. The thing that makes Joshua unique is that he has been charging each of his clients multiple six figures for his amazing ghostwriting and publishing services, the type of money that most authors could only dream of. How does he charge that amount of money? How is he so sure that his clients will make that investment back? How does he pick winners from losers? And how can you, fiction author, translate that into your business model? That's what we're going to be looking at today with my interview with Joshua Lisec. I think you'll like it, but before we dive in, I do want to do a brief announcement. A lot of you have told me that you love these interviews and you love all of my videos, but 9 times out of 10, you don't actually watch them. You listen to them. And if you're on an iPhone, and if you don't have premium, that's kind of problematic because you can't shut your screen off on your phone and just listen. You have to keep the screen up. And then you end up fat fingering a button you didn't mean to, and it's all very embarrassing. I have the solution to your problem. Starting on November 5th, these interviews that you're enjoying on YouTube will be available also in podcast form, wherever you listen to podcasts. If it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. This will be an audio-only format. There's also the additional benefit that while you listen to the podcast, you won't have interruptions of YouTube ads every few minutes, which, by the way, if you didn't know, I don't have control over that, how many they stick in. I can say I want 2 ad breaks and they listen to me, but then they add more. I'm so sorry. So if you're more of an audio-only person, I am happy to say that the solution to your problems is on the way. And with all that being said, let's dive in and hear what Joshua has to say. So you have an impressive track record. Now, ghostwriters, we write more books than most authors. So it's not unusual to say I've written hundreds of books. And you have famously said that you wrote 80 books in a span of 13 years. This is 6 books a year. And that's when you were first getting started. So I'm sure there's been many more since then. So can you walk us through how you built this business and what makes you different from the ghostwriter like myself who just hands you a Word document when we're done here?
Yes, Kristen, thanks for having me on your show. This is fantastic. I believe I'm at just over 110 between the ghostwritten books and the ones I've authored or co-authored myself that I've done since 2011. One of the reasons people come to me, especially in the last, I would say since 2018, 2019-ish, somewhere in there, is not, this is what a lot of people think ghostwriting is. Okay, write a book about this, and make sure you cover this. And the author will often be the creative director and sort of the driving force. I want you to say it this way. And they'd be very picky about style and word choice or whatever. I get the exact opposite experience. Often people will come to me, be they politicians, or be they business owners, or be they entrepreneurs, or be they a celebrity trying to rectify their PR situation. They will come to me and I will tell them what book to write. And then I will go and write that. One of the ways that I wasted a lot of time, I think, early in my career was expecting the client to tell me what book to write. And so I would interview them for months, even a year or more, every single week. 50, 60, 70 even conversations with them, hour-long plus. And I'd have to find the book in that. But once you do enough of that, and you write enough books, and you have successes, and you also see ones that the author says has to be this way, and the author's control freakishness results in an absolute bomb, you realize what readers want and what they don't across multiple genres, be it business or health and nutrition or politics and current affairs, or a memoir mashup that has some self-help how-to tie-ins, or even some advanced scientific topics. So now when someone comes to me, They tell me a little bit about what outcomes they want from their book. What do they want it to do for them? How do they know it's working? What does success look like in all the ways? And then I say, almost like a little formula, like the Joshua Lisec calculator, beep, boop, boop, beep. Okay, because this is what you want. This is the book you're going to write that I'm going to write for you. And they can just sit back and say, oh, that sounds fun. I had a conversation yesterday with someone who's probably going to be working with me. And at the end of the conversation, he said, you completely threw me a curveball. That's not at all what I thought was going to be my book, but that's way better than what I had in mind because it's commercially viable. Why are people going to buy this book, Kristen? That's what I'm asking. And most of the time, an aspiring author is if my family bought it and enjoyed it, that would be success. And nope, wrong.
Exactly right. And that brings me to another thing. So I do fiction and nonfiction, but you have famously said, no, I'm not doing fiction. I'm doing nonfiction. Can you explain why that is in conjunction with your business model?
What I've learned is that good fiction reads like nonfiction and good nonfiction reads like fiction. And a memoir is effectively the novelization of your life story. So I am writing stories, some of which happen to be true, I famously say. I started my career actually, strangely, as a novelist. That's how I got my first memoir clients because people who had read my novels, they related to me that they had wanted to write their own story of their life for years, longer than you've even been alive, Joshua, they had said. And you went and wrote your book twice, two different books, rather. And they said, can you help me write my autobiography, my memoir, but make it read like a novel, kind of like the way you did this here? They don't want a Wikipedia article about their life that's 375 pages. And then I write nonfiction like it's fiction. And in the vast majority of cases, my client is an attorney, a specialist, health-wise, physician-wise, surgical in some way, and or they're some sort of a subject matter expert, and they want to be seen as the guy or the gal in their space. Sometimes it's because they have political ambitions and they don't want to write a meet the candidate sort of book that nobody wants to read, wants to buy. They want to get ahead of that a few years, have a great book that introduces themselves, tells a little bit of their story, but is also useful. And this is what I'd like to hear from you. Do you, Kristen, do you agree with that? A good nonfiction reads like fiction, a good fiction reads like nonfiction?
It honestly depends because I have noticed that for the important, like scientific, where they're detailing facts, here's how you do this, where it's supposed to be very information based. A lot of times they'll want to inject a lot of anecdotes or stories, or what if we did it like The Courage to Be Disliked and we put it through a narrative framing? And sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. And I've found that some material really doesn't lend itself to reading exactly like fiction. So it really depends on it. But I think you're right. Structure, especially memoir. Oh my goodness. The amount of times where I've gotten a client where, oh, I'd like it to be part memoir, part self-help. And then it's basically a list of things they've done in their life. It's okay. Definitely needs to read more like fiction.
Yes, yes. And when I mean with fiction reading like nonfiction, that there are story elements, because now, especially with the proliferation of AI, people will say, oh, they can write their own books. But the real issue is people can write their own books, meaning readers can do that. Teach me how to X, Y, Z instead of going to Amazon and searching up books. So I think the biggest threat to publishing is less AI generated books, although that's a whole conversation. It's going to be instead of, and I'll zoom out in a moment why this is an issue. Readers instead of, or would-be readers rather, consumers, people looking for assistance in some way, instead of buying a book on copywriting, let's say, they go to ChatGPT and ask for some feedback. Instead of writing it themselves, certainly they might use ChatGPT to write some of it and then maybe get a human editor. I think human editors are probably one of the only writing or literary professions that will significantly benefit from the proliferation of AI writing tools, human editors, because so much of what AI generates, even the best ones, even like GPT-5, you can't publish it before an expert human communications professional looks at that. And that's significant. And even if it's to make this not read like AI wrote it, if that's the job of the editors will always have jobs. I don't think so much with ghostwriters, generally speaking. I think it's going to be editors. So ghostwriters who can also edit and work with stuff that already exists, even if it's AI, it's going to be a big deal. I mentioned zooming out a moment ago. The commercial, let's say, filter through which I run every book idea through is one that was popularized by Harvard Business School, but it's been used for the last 15 to 20 years or so at Silicon Valley products, software and whatnot, is called the Jobs to be Done framework, or JBTD. And it goes like this. Customers buy tools to get jobs done. Okay. Also, I want to learn how to write a ultra persuasive sales letter for my product when I have a hard time explaining it to prospects. That's a job to be done. They're everywhere. You could think of them goals or ambitions or tasks. And in order to accomplish that, the person goes out and they look for tools. Now, sometimes the tool is their own brain power and a little bit of grit, figuring out themselves. Sometimes it's pulling up a YouTube tutorial, or it's going on searching such and such best iPhone case Reddit. And so now they're looking for what other people are saying. And of course, Amazon Books is another place people go to look for tools, even if it's part of their research process. Are there other methods or ways of figuring out how to do this that authors have written about and the books have done well? And Jobs to be Done allows an author to make sure the book they're writing is a tool which offers superior value relative to a $20 softcover price, a $32.99 hardcover dust jacket, and the 4 to 6 hours it takes to read it. And when I explain that to an author, they have a sort of bifurcated response, where one is like their shoulders fall and they appear crestfallen as their head droops because they realize nobody wants to read the book they had in mind. But then they also begin to see the light and see hope. What book could I write instead, Joshua? I'm glad you asked. That's why I'm here. And that's why I think I will probably always have a job, frankly, as a ghostwriter, because what the author knows that can get that job done is not yet public, that AI can pull from via the internet. And that's a teasing and untangling, thread loosening process that I do as a ghostwriter.
I think you're right. And that individualization of what this one unique person knows that nobody else knows, or only a few other people knows. That's the way you get around the Chat GPT. So if I were to put my crystal ball out on the desk, probably we're not going to get a lot more ghost written mindset books because GPT's got you covered. You don't need a book for that. But the kind of books that you write for people who have been in a specific business for a long time, who have specialized knowledge and specialized experience that less than 1% of the population would ever have. That's the unique ghostwriting, which led to you being known as Trump World's favorite writer. And this isn't recent. This was back now. There's a lot of chest thumping on Twitter. Like, we don't have to listen to you flag waving commies anymore. We'll say what we want. But back 2016, 2015, when you were really getting into it with the books that you wrote for Scott Adams and Jack Posobiec, you couldn't just say whatever you wanted to say. The authors that you worked with could not just say whatever they wanted to, which is why they had to get away from Big Five publishing, even though they certainly should have had the platform where publishers would be clamoring for them. But they came to you instead, knowing that you would get their message out. Can you walk us through, and forgive me if I've misread things, but I know you used to be vegan. You were on the crunchy side of things. You probably were not 10 years ago someone would point to and say, yes, that's a future MAGA chud right there. But that's where you went because you followed the business. Can you walk us through what that process was like of rising to be Trump World's favorite writer?
Yes. And by the way, there was a socialist magazine called Current Affairs that gave me that label. And they famously said, once I began sharing it, they said, that's not a compliment. Other publications, like I think the Daily Mail and the Guardian, were a little bit more fair, just calling me like the right-wing ghostwriter. He ghostwrites for right-wing and conservative influencers. A little bit more fair in the mainstream media in that regard. But my journey professionally follows my journey personally, where I was very conservative in a traditional sense, growing up in an evangelical homeschool type of family environment, not a lot of association with the outside world. And then as a lot of millennials experience during the college years and early 20s, the pendulum swing over to the other side. And that certainly was the case for me. And as I began spending a lot of time with avowed socialists and atheist activists, very devout atheists, something interesting happened, which is I recognized I don't want my kids to grow up around these sorts of people. They're generally very cynical, pessimistic, negative, and insulting of anyone who was not as skeptical as they were about everything. And there wasn't wonder or awe or joy or even something like happiness and meaning in that world. So I thought, gee, even if these, and many of them, of course, are like Democrats and liberals and sponsored by Planned Parenthood type of events. It's like that sort of community was a bit of a cluster, right? Or an overlap of interests. I thought, I really don't want this for any future children. So even if they're right, they're wrong from the perspective of living a good life. So I was a bit more pragmatic in that regard. And it was very shortly after Donald J. Trump's first victory in 2016 where I got my first legitimate right-wing type of historical nonfiction commission book. And it was for, I guess you might call him a mega donor or a donor, something like that, a very active member of the Republican Party. And it was like, oh, I know these people really well. I grew up believing all of this stuff. And it was interesting writing that in 2017, where I still had that information environment of Rachel Maddow, right, and NPR daily. I'm beginning to see the two movies on one screen, like Scott Adams says, who I would begin working with in short order on his books. And I saw, here's the sky is falling, Trump is Hitler, whatever movie, saying all these things that are about to happen. And in the other movie, working with these clients and starting going to Republican events and conservative events. My first turning point event, and I think 2017, to do some networking and marketing. Because, hey, these are people I can write with because I know how they think. And they were very friendly, very respectful. And they're not as crazy as the sky is falling, let's say MSNBC Americans are over here. And everything they're saying was going to happen didn't happen. We didn't all start speaking Russian and swearing oaths of allegiance to Vladimir Putin like they were saying would happen, in effect. Slight exaggeration, but not by much. I also noticed that the liberal clients that I had would not pay their invoices, on time. And the conservative Christian Republicans always did. And that's more pragmatism of these people lead way better lives. They're happier, they're attractive, they're healthier in all the ways. Their businesses are thriving. And over here, these people are running like 15% off if you're a BIPOC, right? Over here, to try to like drum up business. And it's like, oh, that's gross. And then as I began trying to market my services, there's one particular individual, I was going to go on her podcast, and she said something to the effect of, this was a mildly radicalizing moment. She said something like, Joshua, as you are a white male, we have had too many white males appear on the podcast, so you're going to have to wait another year before we can have you on again. Shortly thereafter, I auditioned for a TEDx event near me, and one of the organizers of it, who wasn't on the selection committee that particular year, but he had been the previous year, and of course I was going to talk about started creating your dream job from scratch and turning your creative work into a business, which is universally applicable and useful, as I had been doing it for, at that point, 7 years, making a living as a writer when that's really hard to do, especially when you're in a tier C city like Dayton, Ohio, as opposed to a tier A like New York, Chicago, or LA. And this particular selection committee member said, Joshua, so you should know this, they're going to give half the spots to Black women. And because you haven't been super involved and aren't a donor or a sponsor, you're probably not going to get one of the ones that's allowed for straight white male Christians, no matter how good you do. I'm sorry, but that's just what you're going to have to expect. Chalk it up. And of course, I go to auditions, and there's probably 30 people there who are auditioning. And this was after I put in my application. And of course, they asked for demographics as well. So I went to the audition in person after I passed the first one. And there was about 30, and 20 of them were Black women. And of all of them, all 29 others, fairly speaking, I couldn't see many of them delivering a speech, a TEDx talk, that was going to get more than 1,000 views. Ultimately, of course, I did not get picked. And then I applied for a different one and was immediately picked. And then I gave that same TED talk that I was supposed to give in my hometown to a different location. And that has done pretty well. And people watch that as learning about my experiences. And you can still see the bit of Josh the Lib was very much in that place. And I was also becoming increasingly unhealthy in body and in mind, I think, because of the detrimental effects of a 100% plant-based diet. And you could really see that by 2019, 2020. I got my blood work done at a physician client's recommendation in 2021, and he was describing the vegan deterioration is very common, Josh. We need to change these things. I ultimately would not implement his feedback for a number of years, but my physical and mental transformation was almost instant when I abandoned veganism. Let's see, almost 5 months to the day as of the recording of this. It was April 8th was my last day as a vegan. And of course, I record little updates and whatnot, and I'm learning how to properly prepare scrambled eggs, much to the chagrin of my followers. And I think I botched a batch so badly that I lost 100 of them. But that's okay. We're all learning here. And I've written all these books about health and wellness. You would just think I would be able to follow the recipes that I had written about. But that first right-wing client back in 2017, 2016-ish, I, from one referral to the next, became more active in that world, writing with more openly conservative, even co-authoring books, like I did with Jack Posobiec. And it was at an event that two Republican clients invited me to that I spent the afternoon in 2017 with J.D. Vance, talking about books and publishing and the future of America and a new vision for the Republican Party.
That is amazing. And what I love most about, and a lot of times, because I've talked about you on previous videos, and I've had people say, why do you talk about him? Because you're a ghostwriter, and it seems like you wouldn't want to talk about your competition. But what I explain to them is, no, what you do, you basically invented ghost publishing. So you're something more than just a ghostwriter. You're actually, not only are you ghostwriting, you're replacing the publishing houses. So, this is a six-figure price point very often, and your authors expect to recoup that investment. Like with me, I'd tell them, okay, you're writing a memoir for your family. There's a high chance you're not going to recoup this investment. This is more of a gift. But for you, there is the expectation that they recoup the investment, which means that they're going to be earning money, which means that one, you have to vet your clients carefully to make sure this book will earn money. And two, the quality has to be spot on. Take us through that, including hypno writing, which I'm not exactly sure I understand. I've seen a lot of tweets about it, and I am intrigued. What does that mean?
We'll talk about hypno writing. We'll start with ghost publishing. So the idea is that it's a bit like ghost writing, where someone does all the work and you get all the credit and fun that comes out of that. And that's where it's a curated, handheld concierge process where I take people from their book being a Google Doc or Word document to it being available in the format they prefer. If they have a massive audience and mainstream potential, then that very well looks like drawing up a book proposal, putting together a list of agents. Ghost writing replies to their potential agents. Ghostwriting replies for the author's agent to send to the acquisitions editor. So I'm really involved in that process. And then it is joining them for calls with their agent and or their acquisitions editor. Their editor telling me, instead of them, what they want from their author's book, sort of a process. Other times it's setting up their own independent publishing imprint. And so their business becomes the book. And it's also producing books that are mainstream potential. If I could pad my part a little bit here, this one by Dr. Philip Ovadia, it's independently published, but as you can see is a real beautiful book. This is the Joshua Lisec Ghost Publishing experience, right? And it just turns out that Ovadia Heart Health is the publishing imprint for this. And as you can see, it looks like a real book. All the layouts there, the Chicago Manual of Style citation formats are created. And it's also available in audiobook, digital, and softcover. And that's also what I did with, I don't have one of his right here, it's in the other room. Scott Adams is famously a ghost publishing client where I took his backlist of books and even some of his new ones that he hadn't published yet. And we rolled ahead with those. I collaborated with him literally on writing and then editing some of them and then re-releasing them in audio, hardcover, so on and so forth. So he doesn't need necessarily to go to a big publisher. He can do it independently and have complete creative control. You talk about the ROI conversation. This is really important for anything that's like a business-to-business service. And that's how I position myself. And I say, hey, look, what you are going to pay a full-service digital marketing agency for a year, that's your Joshua Lisec budget. Also take about a year. But the campaign and what you get from it doesn't end when you stop paying them at the end of the year. You get to use this for the next 15, 20 years of your business. And it will be the keystone, the cornerstone, the foundation of everything that you do. And a good example of this is a book that I wrote it for a construction industry leadership consultant and executive coach. So he's an executive coach, management consultant, etc., but specifically in the construction industry for both residential and commercial builders. And I don't remember at the time, this is maybe 2 years ago, when his book had been out for a year, he sold approximately 800 to 900 copies by that point, mostly from just posting screenshots of book reviews that had gotten on LinkedIn, which is where he knew that his sort of clientele were. And he's promoting it to his newsletter list and any listeners he has to his audience, to his podcast. And of course, having a podcast that has the same name as the book, vice versa, they can promote each other. So after this came out, Dr. Aveda started the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast, which is also a way for him to get on other podcasts, is by inviting them onto his show first. So he's sold 63,000 copies of this. He is one who has recouped everything he paid me and then some from book sales alone. But this other person, this construction guy, maybe 800, 900 copies. Even an independent author is getting between $5 and $9 per copy sold. That's not a lot relative to a six-figure payout to your ghostwriter and ghost publisher. But what does he use his book for? Getting clients. Because he knows that his job to be done is something like, when we bring in a new project manager, I need to be able to know if they're going to run everything on time and on budget and deliver it for our clients. Something like that. That is a really sophisticated job to be done with multiple micro jobs associated with it. So how do they shape their new young project managers to be ultra competent, which you can't necessarily vet for in an interview situation, and it's a $50,000 time and money waster with potential loss of the contract if you hire a dud or a spud, but you didn't know that in the first place. And so this particular coach understands that his book is part of the research these construction leaders are doing to figure out, how do I make sure I hire and train my project managers to become ultra competent in the future and even be the VP going forwards in 5 to 10 years. And so his book is part of teaching his methodologies for training up the next generation of ultra competent leaders. And so what this guy, he's been doing since we began working together, is he sends me pictures of the checks and the bank transfers that clients are sending him for his services. $12,000, $15,000, $25,000, $30,000 for these month-long or even like year-long consulting and coaching and services packages that he calls them another book lead became a client. So it's someone who saw his post about his book, read his book. This is amazing. I got to get this guy in here. And so his book brings him business that would not have likely existed otherwise, because he understands the jobs to be done framework. So he gets a few of those, and this thing pays for itself relatively quick. If any type of marketing or sales investment you're doing isn't likely to pay for itself and then some over a 2 to 3 year period, you probably ought not do it. And so this is the frank conversation I have with my author clients, and I'll tell them, there is no business tie-in here. You probably shouldn't do this book. Sometimes they listen to me, sometimes they don't. It's always a comedy of errors when they don't, but those are fewer and far between nowadays.
Yes, I've definitely had conversations like that, especially with prospective fiction ghostwriting clients. And they don't have a list. They don't have any existing properties. They don't really much have much of a platform. I'm like, you're going to drop all this money up front for an unproven concept. Like, you don't even, people like these kinds of books. That's not, that doesn't mean they're going to buy yours, especially with fiction. Nonfiction, okay, they've got something on the back end, so book sales aren't necessarily as much, but the fiction author, oh my goodness. So what kind of authors, and we'll stick to the nonfiction side of the house here, what kind of authors absolutely should not use a ghostwriter? They should just write it themselves and get a good developmental editor and do their nonfiction work that way.
Usually it's technologists, in my experience. So this would be STEM professionals, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, where your work is so hyper-specific, it cannot be simulated. This is, I think, biotechnologies, pharmaceuticals, when you're actually doing that specific work, and everything must be absolutely precise. Mm-hmm. And only you have access to that research or to those experiments or to the specifications and whatnot. Now, I have ghostwritten books for those types of professionals, actually, But they were, Joshua, I need to translate this into the layperson. So I'm a researcher and I want to teach the business people who call the shots and hold the budget. I want to explain to them the value of the stuff that we do. So I work with a lot of MDs, PhDs, SCDs in my ghostwriting practice. But when your audience is for peers in your profession, not general trade, but it's clinical or it's academic or whatnot, I don't think you can hire a ghostwriter. I think you have to write every single word of it yourself. It will be the most boring read you could ever possibly find, and then call Kristen.
Yes. That's often really good because I've noticed that these really smart people, and God bless them, if you try to have a call where they walk you through it, it's actually more confusing than if they just write the draft first and you work with that. Now, we've been talking about business trends and what kind of nonfiction books are going to be going to a ghostwriter in the future. And you did mention AI. And I think AI is to blame because I'm going to say last year, the majority of my business, because I do both editing and ghostwriting, was nonfiction ghostwriting. This year, I have had almost no nonfiction ghostwriting, but I have had an explosion of long form fiction editing.
Mhm.
And then I wrote this with AI nonfiction, please edit it. So it's almost inverse where, I've had to let some ghostwriting staff go and hire on editing staff because it just completely inverted. What have you seen in the trends with the clients who are coming to you, the work that, the ones that you actually pick up and the work that's being produced that is different now that AI has gotten to a point where it's no longer just LinkedIn poetry that it's producing?
What I did not initially expect, but am no longer surprised by, is the certainty that aspiring authors have when they reach out to me that they're going to use a human ghostwriter. And specifically, it's me. Most of the people who come to me, they've already decided because they've read so good, they call you a fake, or they found me through Jack Posobiec and the book Unhumans we did together, or they saw President Donald Trump on video like endorsing this book and telling everybody to buy it. Okay, that's the Trump world favorite writer. That is not an exaggeration, in my opinion. That said, oftentimes they will say, Joshua, I have a first draft from ChatGPT. What do you think? And it's just 68 pages of something that maybe 6 to 8 pages of it is useful. Much of ChatGPT output, or any of the AIs, Claude, Grok even, it is reminiscent to me of, let's say, a high school essay project in which the student did not do the reading the night before when they wrote it, and it's due the next morning. And so much of it is just fluff that says nothing, and it's waxing and waning eloquently or perhaps not so eloquently without saying much. And if one's writing a book, like you say, on mindset, the best mindset is to have a positive mindset. Understanding that positivity is what helps you have a more self-supportive worldview and outlook. And not just an outlook, but a way in which you can view the world differently. What did I just say there? Absolutely nothing. That's AI. And when you read that, they're like, oh, I can't use AI. I can't use AI for this. Now, sometimes, like with you, they'll come to me and say, can you edit this? Can you work with this? And I will say, absolutely not. We're starting over. And I will explain it through the jobs to be done framework. What do you want it to do? And if I can't get out of them some sort of business case where 500 people buy this book, 50 of them read it and then hire you, and then of the 50, 5 of them are paying you over time multiple 6 figures for your services, your products, your fee, customer lifetime value. If that's not happening, we should not work together. And that 555 layout is a good way of thinking about the ROI of the Lisec experience.
Absolutely fabulous. Because when you're not cooperating with the big publishing enterprise, that does mean you have to hire people, not always ghostwriters, but always editors. And then, of course, you need an artist if you're not artistically inclined yourself. And because the independent publishing movement is getting bigger and louder and more staunchly against trad publishing, of course, that brings in the vultures. You have the shovel sellers, people who exist to scam aspiring authors. And a lot of times, especially on the fiction side, they don't know any better. Oh, this person on Twitter said they read my book and they loved it. Oh, and they can help me with marketing to get the word out. I'm so excited. And it's like Predators and Editors has been what has been like 20 years it's been online, and yet they're still falling for the same old scams. So if you could, and this is for fiction and nonfiction, if you could give like a rundown of what a truly independent author should spend money on, and if you could speculate what a good upfront investment would look like from an indie author looking to get their name out and their book in front of new viewers.
Book promotion that actually sells copies is not sexy, but it's doing the same two things over and over again, but trying different versions of it. The two things that work are relentlessly pounding your own audience as it grows. And one of the reasons it grows is because you're giving interviews. So your own audience, telling them over and over and over that you have a book, go buy it. And I do this at least twice a day on my largest social media followings. I do this every single day, at least twice. I'm telling them to go buy Bulletproof, the Trump book, or Unhumans, the communism book, or So Good They Call You a Fake. Or one of my writing courses that I have, maybe a dozen of going back over the last 5 years. And of course, I talk about my books in those courses as well. Every day, at least twice, I'm pounding my people with my book. And every PR pitch that goes out for my PR girl, I'm mentioning Joshua has these books. It's always about the book. So your audience has to know that you have a book. And you must tell them every single day. And this is how the construction industry leadership consultant author, this is how he gets clients, is every day he says something new about his book. Sometimes it's a picture. This is what I mean by the variations in testing. Sometimes it's simply a link to Amazon. Have you read my book yet? Other times it's staging a photo where you open up the book, get your orange highlighter and highlight a cool sentence, taking a picture of it, and then posting that on your LinkedIn or on your Twitter or whatever, and asking an engagement bait type question out of it to get some engagement. Oh, wow, what's this from? Oh, it's from my book. Here's the link. That sort of perpetual promotion of your piece. And there's various versions of that. And sometimes it is replying when someone asks a question, like on a viral tweet, you reply with just a picture of your cover of your book, if it addresses whatever it is that the author of that original viral post was speaking about. Everyday relentless pounding of your own audience. It's putting a big splash on your business's website that you have this new book out. It's ordering 100 copies at 85% off retail price from, if you're independently published, Amazon KDP using their print-on-demand software. And you're sending it out to, let's say, there's 20 businesses around you that would be good referral clients. Maybe you're a family and a marriage attorney. And there are marriage counselors, there's therapists, there's this, that, and the other that are relatively close in terms of the type of professions you have, and you offer 20 of them 5 copies of your book with a cute little display stand to put in their office in their waiting room. Boom. One of the best marketing spend you'll ever have. So there's that option. It's perpetual promotion of your book. And you have to do it for minimum 18 months. So publication day is 1 day. The publication period is 18 months. This all is just one of the two. Do you have any specifics about that, Kristen, before I talk about the interviews aspect of this, which also applies to fiction authors, oddly enough? But we'll save that for just a moment to see if you have any follow-ups or specifics you want to ask about.
For the 18-month period, where does the rapid release model, because this is more of a fiction thing, obviously you don't have nonfiction authors pumping out one every month, but a lot of fiction authors have gotten the idea that the best advertising for your last book is your next book. And so a lot of them pumping out one per month and then to ride that algorithmic wave. So if you've got that 18-month period where, you're talking, but then you've got 9 to 15 books that have come out in that 18th period, what do you do there? Or should you not be doing the rapid release in that case?
Rapid release is okay. And that's also, again, it just speaks to the book promotion and marketing. There was a Facebook group that maybe you're familiar with, Kristen. It was something along the lines of 50,000 US dollar a year authorship, something like that. How can you as an author make 50K a year roughly?
Yeah, it was 20 books to 50K. Yes.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so that the standard. Now, I've seen it as about 10 books, but 20 books also is fine. And a lot of this is fiction, in the fiction space. So authoring 20 fiction books in the same universe. Because oftentimes, and we see this with, what is it called? Fairy Loot or Fairy Box. It's the United Kingdom-based book subscription service where every month or every quarter they send you a bunch of random books from unknown authors that are in your preferred genre. So do you like dark romantasy with a male harem? Okay. I think it's hyper specific. And they'll send you 3 books to read over the next 3 months, or they'll send you 12 to read in 1 month. Something like that, right? Where you're going to be binging a bunch of it. It's literary Netflix binging experience. And this is true in fiction and in nonfiction, where you want to digest it and begin testing it out in the real world, whether it's about cooking or it's about building rockets with your kids that are mildly safe. And it's a real world activity you're going to implement. And of course, you have an upsell to get your buy one, get one rocket free if you use this coupon code for readers only. Here's the QR code in the front of the book. So got that tie in the nonfiction to get you as being a business lead. Everything is about cross sells and upsells to make money as a nonfiction author. And allegedly, the author Alex Hormozy had the first ever $100 million book launch with his latest book called $100 million Models. And that was by upsell maxing. I bought the copy of his book for $40. Okay. And as soon as you click add to cart, oh, wait, there's more. For only $499, you get all these courses. Nope. But wait, you missed this special offer. And there's like 4 levels of upsells to a $7,000 something or other. Just give me the book. And you go to checkout and it says success. Now, would you like for only $90 this other thing? So it's upsells everywhere. Now, someone like a consultant or an attorney, it doesn't make sense to upsell quite to that extent. But if you're doing, like, let's say a high conflict divorce, that's 20 to 100K in fees you're charging, perhaps even more if you're in a tier A city like Toronto or Chicago, and paying a ghostwriter 100K plus to get you clients like that. Oh, that's a no-brainer, even if you only have the one thing you sell, which is your services that you bill by the hour or whatnot. But for fiction space, just because you're writing books doesn't mean that people are going to be buying them. You have to obsessively talk about them. So this can mean talking about the next book and the sequel and the cliffhanger. It could mean publishing the first chapter or the first scene or even the first page of the next book that you're writing. Make sure you get the first one. Or what I'm thinking about these 3 names for this new character in the second book. What do you think? I'm running a poll. Okay, 5 people voted, but that's not 0. Maybe 1 or 2 of those people buy. That's $20. Okay, great. That obsessive promotion. Everything you're doing, you should be talking about, whether it is writing your second book or your 22nd book.
Nice. Yeah. So moving on to interviews, and I get a lot of questions about that. People are like, oh, can you get me on podcasts? And 2 things. One, in general, no, I have a podcast, but I'm not inviting you on it because you're boring. So especially we're talking about fiction authors, because I feel like nonfiction authors, they're talking about their industry. It's a little easier to target which podcasts they're going to be on. What does that interview leg of the journey look like?
One of the reasons that Stay Off My Operating Table by Dr. Philip Avadia was successful is, and I helped him with this, we identified probably more than 250 podcasts that would be perfect for his book. And ultimately, he recorded between 50 and 60 total interviews in the months leading up to release. Most of those interviews went live during the pre-order stage, and a few more of them went live all on the same day. So everyone is hearing about his book all at once. He gets this big influx of several thousand copies sold. Those readers then begin referring it. He ends up going on really big podcasts where they have you actually fly across the world to interview with them for 2 hours in their special high-end sort of 4K studio recording environment. He gets millions of views from those, and then the book is effectively selling itself. So he is working really hard initially to sell dozens of copies. And then when he's selling tens of thousands of copies, not working nearly as hard. And it's because effectively to sell 1 copy is a lot of effort, which equates to selling about 100 copies on down the line. Same level of effort, right, to move the sales numbers that much. But you have to get this sort of engine turning in the same way, like if you want to start a fire, for example, versus keep a fire going. Everything in the natural world is like this. So if you want to sell your book like a bonfire, then you need to treat it like that, where you need to have all the ingredients lined up and getting specific about it, arranging the wood in a certain way, all the fuels that you need, the protection, the wind, all these factors. And giving interviews is going to be lots of them. And oftentimes it's, okay, who do you already know and are friendly with that has a podcast? And how can you come up with a tie-in to it? So there's this fellow named Kurt Schlichter who is a novelist, and he writes a lot of, let's say, patriot-themed dystopian type of futuristic cyberpunk stuff. Okay, we'll put it that way. And he goes on a lot of podcasts to talk about the stories he writes that are novelization, but the sort of the psychology of the situation is identical to the news. And so he's able to put that sort of near futuristic spin on what could happen based on what you just seen in the news today. And here's the story I tell based on that. And so he becomes a subject matter expert on the news and current events for this particular niche of current affairs and politics and whatnot because of the types of stories he writes about. And if one is a, let's say, a science fiction, like a hard sci-fi novelist, and one of the things that you do is you, let's say, develop new laws of physics or something like that, then amateur physicist podcasts you need to be on. Any type of like science communication type podcast you need to be going on. And you very well may be the first and only person who is a novelist that they've ever had on. So instead of going to a novel show where we've interviewed 100 novelists this year on sci-fi and nobody cares, you're going where no one has gone before. Okay, at least in your profession, onto this hard science, let's say STEM type of educational show. And you can teach how you came up with this based on the past. And so, wow, that's really interesting. What's your book again? You all need to go buy it. Links in the show notes. So now you have someone who is telling their audience, and you may be the first novel that they've ever recommended on the show, which is something different.
Now, speaking of doing something different, I will say that the majority of people that I've had on my podcast are authors themselves and usually fiction. You are unique in that you've written fiction, but you've co-authored. Unhumans is the most recent one and the one that really made a splash because it wasn't just, okay, here's what I stand for. It's here's what I stand against and the type of people that you're up against and who came after you. And you said, no, thank you. So that was a really powerful work. And then on the other side, you've got So Good They Call You Fake, which is basically your business card. This is what I do. This is how I can help you. I read that book and I listened to the audio in particular. I really enjoyed that performance. And can you talk about, do you feel like, I don't want to say everybody, but if we're talking about a fiction author, do you feel like everyone could benefit from having that kind of a nonfiction work in their library? Something that's basically their business card saying, this is what I'm about, this is what I do, and here's why you should listen to me.
I expect so. Many years ago, this is maybe 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in there. I made the acquaintance of Joanna Penn, a British woman. She authors action adventure, like James Rollins style books under the pen JF Penn. And after having several of her novels written out, she started writing nonfiction books that was about the works that she had been writing novels about. And now she's probably up to 250 books, half of which are fiction, half of which are nonfiction. And now she's a mainstream author with major book deals, international bestsellers, and she's traditionally published some of her most recent sort of books. And that's because she proved her ability to sell. This is what traditional publishers are looking for. They want you if you don't need them. And it makes sense when a good agent is getting 2,000 unsolicited queries every single week. It has an army of unpaid interns, because of course they're unpaid, going through creating spreadsheets, analyzing who has the largest existing audiences and track record of commercial success of other products that they have released to their audience. They will rank them 1 to 2,000 and then reach out to the top 3 or 5 that week.
Ouch.
And that's traditional publishing.
And yeah, because I get a lot of, to a certain extent, most of my audience is male. I'm going to say something like 93%. And they say, I'm being excluded because I'm white, male, and straight. And I said, you're right. But people who are, of the correct check boxes are also getting rejected simply because of numbers, simply because the industry can't keep up with how many people want to get into that business. So in terms of making a mark, in terms of saying, here I am, here is what I have, what would you recommend? So say, for a fiction author who already has a fiction work, what question should they ask themselves in terms of, is nonfiction a direction I should go? And how do I do it?
I think the first question is, how fast can I get to 20 entries in my series? What does that look like? And there's that expression, if an author writes a book in a forest and there's no readers there to hear it, did they actually write a book? Something like that is the expression. Just because you're writing books doesn't mean anyone's going to read them. So you need eyeballs. And often the novels you want to write, nobody really cares. It's better to go to the bookstore or go to Book Talk and even look up like reviews of books in your genre. What person reviewing a book, the video has 1.8 million views? Oh, gee, I wasn't thinking about writing about that. Huh. Oh, that's interesting. I don't want to write about that. I want to sell 5 copies in the next 5 months. Not necessarily recommended. And this is what that jobs to be done thing is. And if you're writing a novel for someone, that someone is looking for novelty if they haven't read anything of yours before. So you need to do a mashup of multiple genres that together the theme speaks to what the particular person is going through in their life. We could take this lesson from Taylor Swift. Her popularity is because she has helped the millennial liberal female in the United States for almost 20 years feel seen in every stage of their lives. She's telling their story. Every liberal millennial female has their top 5 T-Swift list. And it's those are the 5 seasons of my life. Those are the 5 seasons I've been going through recently. Those are 5 emotional states I find myself perpetually in. And you can do the same with your book where the theme of it is helping a gal feel seen. Now, the vast majority of most genres of fiction are being read by women, but you'll find that the New York Times bestselling fiction list is mixed in that a lot of men actually choose books from that. Sort of social proof of what are people reading? I won't waste my time on anything trying to discover new books. I'll just read what is from Brad Thor or whatever. And they pick that and then that's what they read. Or James Rollins and so on and so forth. But still, what is the job to be done? For women fiction readers, female readers of fiction, it's to feel seen. So you need to do your market research, actually. And does it make sense that this population wants to read nonfiction that I can write? So it's a sort of think of what should I do being answered by a cluster of a Venn diagram. There's what people want to read, right? There's what hasn't been written by a mainstream voice yet, quite yet, and I can actually write well. And those 3 themes are overlapped. And even in my case, there is not a sort of right-wing ghostwriter who's known for writing really well-written, right-wing books that people are willing to pay for. So that's my niche that I've become publicly known for. I will probably at some point under a pen name start writing fiction, my own fiction and my own series. I think I see an opening somewhere that would be a hilarious conversation. I think I do. I don't know if I want to be public about it yet because that hasn't quite been written yet. I think I see one, but that's for another conversation. In any case, this is the question to ask yourself. What hasn't quite been written yet? If you're going to write Lord of the Rings fan fiction, not going to make it, okay? Because again, are people willing to pay for your version of that? And then can you actually write it really well? Yeah, probably not. And we see a lot of straight white male types having success outside the traditional domain and then parlaying that into traditional success, as I have with my own books. Money talks really loudly, and it also talks louder than your own race and your sex. And so you can parlay that into traditional mainstream book deals, book offers, and whatnot, as I have, despite the demographics working against me in the woke places and whatnot. And it's because of figuring these 3 things out. So that's where you want to start. What can I write well that people will pay to read and hasn't quite yet been written?
Fantastic. So if you could recommend, hey, go buy my X, what would you recommend my viewers go out and buy of yours right now?
I think for most people, it's going to be so good they call you a fake. This is like the magnum opus of my ghostwriting experience, publishing experience, and also teaching authors who have subject matter expertise in their industry, package it in such a way that their success is duplicatable for future readers, but also customers and clients. And I have had a number of celebrity clients, including billionaires and Hollywood A-listers over the years, but I don't talk about them in here because, of course, they were going to be successful, Josh. I don't want that excuse. So I picked people who are everyday, average, even they might admit to being a nobody in their niche. And how did we make them great? How did we make them the household star in their industry or in their niche? By leveraging a book strategically, and also how I did that to get them results that are so good they call them fake.
I love it. And it's so funny. You always know you succeeded when they say, "Psh, grifter. Thank you."
Yes, yes. And of course, that's available on Amazon and Audible and iBooks, iTunes, and wherever else one would find their books. And there's even a few bookstores around the country that carry it.
Awesome. And I'm going to have a link down below for the video. Is there anything else you want people to know or anything else you want to talk about or?
I have a show on YouTube that I started almost a year ago. It's a test. Like you always need to be testing things. It's called Daily Persuasion, and I spend between 5 and 15 minutes seeing what's in the news, what's in current events, what's in the zeitgeist, or what's going viral, and I analyze it from the perspective of what can you take away from the attention this is getting and the influence it's having to better influence the people in your life, in your business, in your market, and in your career. Every single day on YouTube called Daily Persuasion. I'm going to do 500 episodes before I reevaluate the format, the time, the context, and that sort of thing. And I just passed episode number 300.
Nice. Yeah, that's always good. And I love your work with where you're examining headlines and what they're saying. It's, oh, there's those adverbs again. You're trying to confuse what's actually being said. And I think pointing that out really helps. Oh, why is this being phrased this way? And why is this story the headliner instead of something else? So it's like having that kind of awareness, I think, is really an excellent skill for everyone to have.
Yes.
I think that's it. This was fantastic. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for having me on, Kristen. I appreciate it.